Alrighty, what is up, fellas and fellitas? Uh, Last week, hope you guys had a good Easter. No episode last week, but we're back this week with another episode of Rewriting History with the Goob, and we're talking about Quetzalcoatl and his connections to Christianity and to Jesus Christ. But before we get into that, I did have some stuff from the last episode, some updates. Gotta close that. There we go. So someone brought to my attention that some of the symbols that we're seeing here in the Brewer's Cave relics, specifically these types of symbols right here, and there were many different languages and symbols, as you recall, but one of them are these lines on, a longer line. Some of them are angled, most of them are straight. They're of various lengths going up and down. And you see this on several of these Burroughs Caves. I think I said Brewers, but Burroughs Caves artifacts. You'll see these symbols. And like I said, someone brought to my attention that these symbols are very, very similar to some other known symbols. And here it is with that very clearly Egyptian symbol up top and these other symbols down below. So these are all Burroughs Caves. This is now Michigan relics. But these symbols, let's see if I can find the right tab here. It was suggested that Ogham, this Celtic runic language of Ogham, is very reminiscent of these symbols. You can see, some a code here or whatever, an alphabet, if you will. And here's an actual example of these symbols on a rock, looking extremely similar to the examples that are found on the Burroughs Cave artifacts. So could there be a connection to the Celts with the Burroughs Cave artifacts? Sure seems to resemble them pretty well. I don't know for sure. You're definitely, like I said, there's this tab over here where you have that very, very clearly Egyptian. Like I said, you had a lot of different languages, but they're all like Mesopotamian area. They're all, like Northern Africa kind of area. And this is potentially Celtic. This looks actually slightly different. You've got but this looks very, very, very much like and there were several stones like this. This looks exactly like that Ogham language right here. So yeah, I don't know what to make of that. I have talked about Celts being in America. So could these have been people that came, from other areas and potentially interacted with Celts and picked up their language as well? I don't know. I don't even know 100% that this is this Ogham language, but it sure does look very, very similar to it. So I thought I'd bring that up, and I appreciate that it was brought to my attention. Another thing I wanted to point out is that you see this only in the Burroughs Cave artifacts. You do not see this in the Michigan Cave artifacts, and similarly in the, not Michigan Cave, but the Michigan relics. Similarly in the Michigan relics, you see these symbols everywhere, these line with a diagonal line coming out of the bottom, and then a series of, varying numbers of lines coming out of the top. These are all over the Michigan relics, and you don't see them in the Burroughs Cave relics. So while you do see some similar symbols, like this Yahweh or Jehovah that's at the top, And there were some other similarities in languages and symbols between the various relics. They are definitely not a one-to-one match. There are symbols that are unique to each location. So, yeah, the Ogham connection, potential Ogham connection, is very interesting with this. You know, and the fact that there are similarities but distinct differences between each set of artifacts. So that was all I had. Quick update for, you know, those items. I might do an episode on Brewer's Cave as well, which I've looked into. It doesn't seem to be as connected to these other two locations. Like I was just saying, these two locations have similarities. The Brewer's Cave kind of seems to be more of a standalone, but it does have some connections to other things, some other copper plates and Indian relics that I thought were interesting. So I'll probably talk about that next week or sometime soon. But on to Quetzalcoatl and his connections to Jesus Christ, potentially. I'm going to close a couple of these tabs. I've got a lot open here. There were also, and might as well mention it here, these are Viking runes, and I think these are Celtic runes. You see some of these symbols as well. Is that just a coincidence? I mean, you see overlapping symbols between different languages, and it doesn't always necessarily mean anything. But I definitely saw some of these symbols on the Burroughs Cave relics as well. So maybe that's just a coincidence, you know, similar symbols, or maybe there was some other Celtic runes in there as well. Really not too sure. So, all right. So Quetzalcoatl, he's a tough one because according to mainstream history, when the conquistadors came over, when Cortez came over and met with Montezuma and then took over this continent, they destroyed everything. They destroyed literally everything. No records survived, and the entire history of this continent was rewritten by the conquistadors and the Christians. And any record that is supposedly going back further is really just a modern creation and, you know, manipulation by the Spanish. So if you believe the mainstream, we know essentially nothing of Mesoamerican history. I find that very difficult to believe, that all of their history was completely erased, completely rewritten, and completely lost. And it seems that this effort to erase their history and rewrite their history is still ongoing. I was reading through Wikipedia, you know, because there's a handful of these codexes that supposedly were pre-Columbian and have since been translated by Spanish and other people and copied since then. So we don't necessarily have, for a couple of them, we potentially have the original codexes, or at least had, you know, recorded through history at various points that we had them. They made it out of the Columbian era. Hey, Mr. G, how you doing? But as I was reading through Wikipedia about this short list, it's like half a dozen. It's like 5 to 7 of these codexes that supposedly survived, you know, the purge by the Spanish and were later copied and preserved. And as you read through the articles, they'll mention other pre-Columbian codexes. But when you click on the articles for those codexes, they always mention at the top that these are not pre-Columbian, that they are Spanish, essentially forgeries, Spanish, works of fiction, just Spanish colonization, and it is not true pre-Columbian history. It is not true Mesoamerican history. So it would seem that this effort to erase their history is still ongoing. This small handful of codexes that did survive, that used to be recognized as surviving codexes, are now being rewritten. Like I said, when you dig down into the articles, they haven't edited every single line yet, but at the top of every single article, they go, no, this is not pre-Columbian. This is not actually Mesoamerican history. So it seems they're continuing to try and erase their history. But what do we maybe know about Quetzalcoatl? There's several different stories, and I'm not going to focus on all of them because not all of them are relevant to this. I'm going to be focusing on the parallels between Jesus Christ and Christianity and Quetzalcoatl. So one parallel is that Quetzalcoatl seems to appear around the time of Christ. We have a very loose history of Mesoamerica, so take that with a, grain of salt there. But around 2,000 years ago, we see the first depictions of Quetzalcoatl appearing, and he is appearing as a feathered serpent, as this rainbow dragon, and this would be all the way back in like Olmec times. And then he is consistent throughout every single culture within the area, throughout all time periods. Quetzalcoatl is a figure point, if not the figure point, for all of these cultures as their main deity or close to their main deity. And he is always this feathered serpent. But then around maybe 1,000 years ago, quite possibly sooner than that, again, very loose history, we don't know a lot for certain, you start seeing Quetzalcoatl appear as a man. So now you have Quetzalcoatl the dragon and Quetzalcoatl the man, who are also the same thing, right? And there's a historical Quetzalcoatl about 1,000 years ago, a leader who took on the name of Quetzalcoatl. And it would seem that he took on this name, not that he was the origin of Quetzalcoatl as a man necessarily. He may not have been the first iteration, but he is someone who adopted the name. And he was actually against human sacrifice. So these people are often portrayed as savages and, all obsessed with human sacrifice and stuff. Quetzalcoatl was anti-human sacrifice. Quetzalcoatl preached love and wisdom. Quetzalcoatl was born of a virgin mother. He healed people by laying his hands on people. He, rose someone from the dead. It was not in the exact same way as Jesus Christ. It was more akin to like Nordic gods. He went to the underworld and actually pulled someone back up from the underworld. So he was going around and laying hands on people and healing them almost exactly like Jesus Christ, but his resurrection from the dead actually involved him traveling to the underworld. So a little bit different, but still raising people from the dead. He was crucified, and the image on the thumbnail, right, is him being crucified here, and he's not being crucified on a cross, but he was associated with crosses. It was a very significant symbol in their religion, and supposedly associated with the 4 cardinal directions, the 4 cardinal zodiacs. So not necessarily the exact same symbology as the Christian cross, but it was associated with Quetzalcoatl, and it was very significant. You see these crosses playing a pretty central role. And then I wasn't going to go into this, but I just pulled up this image. I was going to go into this later. But all of these depictions of Quetzalcoatl, because I've mentioned before that he potentially was a white man, white bearded man with blue eyes, and there are descriptors of him like that. But all of these potentially pre-Columbian depictions of Quetzalcoatl don't really appear to have him having white skin. I believe this is Quetzalcoatl in the center here, and you see white skin, light skin, and then this red skin between these guys here. And Quetzalcoatl has the red skin, so certainly not white. And there's other depictions, and this is just a same exact image. The color saturation is a little bit different, but it shows the exact same thing: white, yellow, red. I had some. Okay, so here's one of the alternate versions of the Quetzalcoatl myth involves him having a twin. So you have the white twin and the black twin, but you look at their hands here, that's not referring to their skin color. They're wearing clothing that is white and black. So according to the mainstream, this whole idea that Quetzalcoatl was a white man is a complete fabrication of the Spanish Christians. They're trying to Christianize, this Mesoamerican history. And so because he was the white twin, right, he was the white god, they then started saying, oh, he was a white god, a white-skinned, blonde-haired, blue-eyed god. And, since there are all of these depictions of Quetzalcoatl, and he does not appear to really be a white man, there may be some validity to that. But then you think about Cortez coming and meeting Montezuma when he came to conquer the lands, and Cortez, this savage, right? These people are savages who are constantly killing each other, warmly welcome Montezuma warmly welcomes Cortez into his court and into his palace, and gives him this extremely warm greeting, which is kind of interesting for a savage to do, right? This primitive savage is welcoming these white men into his home and giving him free reign of his kingdom. Unless, of course, he did actually believe that this guy was Quetzalcoatl, like the story says. So Cortez pulls up on the beaches. He's met by these natives. The natives go, holy crap, Quetzalcoatl has returned. We have to take you to our leader, to Montezuma. Montezuma hears that Quetzalcoatl has returned, and so he's all pumped, he's all excited, and he welcomes in Cortez, and he goes, Quetzalcoatl, our god, you've come back to us. What would you have us do? And that does seem to fit rather well with the events, right? Because then all of these people joined him in a war against and conquered their own lands with Cortez. And yes, the mainstream explanation is, oh, these people were being brutalized. These people were tired of being oppressed, and so anything was better. They would take their chance with these strangers, these aliens from an alien land, rather than living under their horrific conditions. I don't know. You guys decide which one of those sounds more likely. So, cenotes? What's a cenote? Yeah, and Mr. Slav, trying to get a straight story from anywhere. I really have done a good amount of research on this here, and I've gone to many different sources, and it's the narrative that their entire history was erased is. I mean, it sure seems to have some truth to it, because trying to get any type of Mesoamerican history is extremely difficult beyond anything that's like really, really, really surface level. And even then you get multiple different accounts. So it is difficult. But back to all of the connections between Quetzalcoatl. So like I said, there's several depictions of him pre-Columbian where they do show him crucified, and here his wrists and ankles are tied, but there's several statues and other depictions of him having the stigmata, the holes in his hands and in his ankles, and it's a clear part of the statue or the painting. So this idea of Quetzalcoatl being crucified is a very similar to Christ, despite him not being on a cross. And I don't see depictions of him on a cross. He's usually on some type of setup like this, but there are many other depictions of him crucified like this, several of them using nails, like I said, and others where the nails aren't present, but the stigmata is present. And look at this wound here in his side. How was Jesus wounded on the cross? He was stabbed in his side. There's a lot of parallels. I'm forgetting several of them. I know I am, which is upsetting me a little bit right now. But there are a lot of parallels between Quetzalcoatl and Jesus Christ. It's not just a few. Obviously, the cross is one of them. And there's depictions, and I don't know where they come from, but I've seen images of a blonde, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, pale-skinned Quetzalcoatl wearing robes with the cross encircled in it, and that is one of the very central symbols of Mayans and Aztecs were the encircled cross, so the cross with a circle around it. Sea notes are the giant limestone 200-foot deep sinkholes that were used to toss bodies into. Okay, yeah, those things were like in the middle of the jungle. Those things are rather interesting. I've seen some images of them. But yeah, Quetzalcoatl, the Mormons, right? So the Mormon beliefs are something that are hard to get into also. What exactly do they believe? Because there's also a lot of different, I guess, sects of Mormonism, a lot of different beliefs going on. But one line of belief is that they actually believe Quetzalcoatl was Jesus Christ. That I guess after he was resurrected on the cross, he came to the Americas to continue preaching his message. And, there's some things that kind of make sense with that. Man, my brain is not wanting to work very well right now. I had a lot to say on the Mormons and Quetzalcoatl and Christ, and right now I'm just fully drawing a blank. So the Mormons are a rather interesting group too. I was learning about their leader, and talking about John Dees a few weeks ago, and him communing with angels and treasure hunting, which I never got into it. I do want to do an episode on their lives because it's a very fascinating life. But the Mormon founder has a lot of similarities with that. He came from a home where he was like born into this life, kind of deal. His home had some religious relics and books and stuff, and he was proclaimed as like a seer at birth, and he was a treasure hunter. He communed with angels to find treasure, and he built himself a reputation as a treasure hunter and locator before starting the religion of the Mormons. So some interesting, I don't know. I thought there was some interesting parallels there, and the Enochian language. They didn't fully start a religion, but they added to Christianity. And I guess the Mormons, in that respect, didn't fully start a religion either. They added to Christianity. So it's just these parallels of people, summoning angels, talking with them, starting religions or adding to religions, and treasure hunting, and being successful in all of those things. So, yo, Chad's in here. What is up, man? Good to see you. I just did all of that to try. I'm totally blanking on what I had to say about the Mormons, which is don't know what's going on here. I completely lost what I had to say about the Mormons. But they do. They believe, some of them at least believe, that Quetzalcoatl was Jesus Christ. And it's not the craziest idea to me, or at least that he had some connections to Jesus Christ. I've talked previously about how there are many different Christ figures, like Rosicrucians, and several others that I've listed before that I won't be able to list right now off the top of my head. And so even if this Quetzalcoatl was not Jesus Christ, he could have been a Christ, right? And there's these archetypes for a reason, and fulfilling these archetypes, I don't think Christ was as unique as most Christians like to believe he is. And I'm not even saying that he wasn't unique, just that he maybe wasn't as unique as people like to think, because there are all of these other Christ figures. So a Christ figure appearing in the Americas, you see these Christ figures in India, you see these Christ figures in the Americas with Quetzalcoatl, you see them across the Middle East, you see them in China, in all parts of the world. So, and there's, in my religion episodes, I talked about how I believe the gods are real, how I believe this is based off of something, how I believe these Christ figures are real. So, this archetype appearing here in America too, what exactly does it mean? I don't know. Do I think it was literally Jesus Christ? Maybe not, but do I think it was one of these Christ figures that appeared and was following that Christian archetype, that Jesus Christ archetype, and fulfilling all of those duties like all of these other Christ figures did? That makes sense. So, what? I don't know. Make of that what you will. I really, really wish I could remember everything I wanted to say about the Mormons. I had cool connections to make, and I've just gone fully retarded. It's totally left my brain. And I will definitely remember many more parallels between Jesus Christ and Quetzalcoatl before the after the stream ends, because it's not just a couple little things. Like, the more I looked into this, the more I was like, man, this is really seems to be describing like the same figure here. But the idea of him being a white man, I don't know, conflicting information. There's so much conflicting information, because the story of Cortez coming over and being mistaken for Quetzalcoatl, I think, makes a lot of sense. But then you do have these depictions of Quetzalcoatl where he clearly is not being depicted as a white man. So who knows? The name of America is something I wanted to mention. So the official story for the name of America is that Amerigo Vespucci was confused by someone over in England or France or wherever the hell in Europe, on Monday with the solar eclipse. I don't think it's ending Monday, but I do think it's ending soon. So, but Amerigo Vespucci, someone over in Europe thought that he was the first person to make it over to America before Columbus, and so it got named after Amerigo. America became the name of this country, and that sounds so utterly ridiculous to me. This would have been the biggest piece of news in these people's lifetimes, right? The discovery of the New World, the discovery of the Americas. And so the idea that, oh, this one guy got confused and thought that it wasn't Columbus, it was Amerigo. And so then the entire world started calling it America because of this one guy's little mistake. And it's like, I feel like everybody would have known who Columbus was and who discovered America. Again, assuming the mainstream narrative is true, because you know how I feel. You know I definitely don't believe that at all. Columbus was not first. Not only were there Vikings and other people like that, but there were other Europeans around the time of Columbus who were just doing it before him. So, but, right, according to the mainstream, this would have been like the moon landing, essentially. And you're telling me that people don't know it was Columbus and that they just got it mixed up and now it's America forever for the whole world. No. An alternative explanation is that another name for Quetzalcoatl, because all of these different cultures, we call them the Aztecs now. It was like 17 different tribes. They were never called the Aztecs. And then there were these other groups as well, both before and just in other locations. All of them worshipped Quetzalcoatl, but not all of them called him Quetzalcoatl. And one of the names was Amaru, which I believe was also a word for cross in this language. So the association of Quetzalcoatl and the cross was there. And then Amaru, and the word for land was Ka. So Amaru, Ka, Amaruka, America, the land of, the feathered serpent, the land of the rainbow dragon, the land of Quetzalcoatl, the land of the cross. That honestly makes more sense to me. Who knows? And then if, okay, so now I kind of remember some of the Mormon stuff I wanted to touch on. So it was mentioned, I believe, by Mark. My family thinks I'm crazy, that the motivation for, or at least part of the motivation for covering up the Celtic mounds, especially early on in America's history, is if there were these other groups of people here previously to Columbus, right? If we were acknowledging that the Celts had made it here first, that kind of does mess with some of the land claims that are being made. And so it becomes very, very, very valuable to cover up that information. And so with Quetzalcoatl, if you had these white people coming here previously, and especially with the Catholic Church being like the most powerful group at the time in the entire world, if Jesus Christ and Christianity, or at least something that very clearly was connected to it, was over here in the Americas, that really throws a major wrench in the whole narrative they've got going on. And it would be very, very, very valuable to them to come over here and erase that. And that also kind of makes sense with the completeness of the erasure that supposedly happened of their culture. Because according to the mainstream, and pretty well what I can tell in my research as well, is that it was all just fully and entirely destroyed. No documents. They didn't have a written language exactly. They didn't have words. But you can see that in their, they were clearly using symbols, and they were communicating, right? Like there's a lot going on in these images here that I don't understand. I couldn't tell you what all this stuff means, but like they clearly did have messages, and very little of this has survived, and the vast majority of it has been destroyed. But yeah, so if they were destroying the evidence of this great civilization and this potentially Christian civilization and the existence of, Jesus Christ, or at least these Christ figures in America, the land of the cross, the land of Quetzalcoatl, the land of Christ, yeah, that would make sense why such a complete erasure was done on these people's culture, because there really is seemingly nothing left, like nothing. It's kind of crazy. So let me read what you guys have been saying in chat. The Mormons, kind of believe in what I was just saying, I guess, is that, there was Christianity over here, that Christians did come over here, that one of the lost tribes of Israel was over here, and then there was this cover-up by the Catholic Church and the conquistadors, I suppose, and the destruction of all of it, and then they're still trying to uncover the true history of Americas, which is, the true land of Christ, I guess. So I don't know. Are the Mormons right? The Mormons, I think that Quetzalcoatl, the history of Mesoamerica, and also potentially to some degree the Mormon religion do hold some very important pieces of the puzzle. I think that especially, drawing these connections you see all across the world, the nubs, you see all these different connections across the world, right? There was obviously connections of civilization across the world in the ancient past. And so if Christianity, Christ and crosses and all of this is another connection that's maintained throughout the entire world in ancient past, which it sure seems to be, that's just another one to chalk up. And, goes, like I said, India, Asia, Europe, obviously, Russia, and now the Americas as well. That's pretty crazy. So yeah, the OG Jews, some believe that for sure. What about the portal? I'm not sure. If anyone is interested in calling in, let me know in chat and I'll launch another meeting. Otherwise, I might wrap it up here. I think Jesus might have gone to Mexico. I do think so. I think it's possible. And if not literally Jesus, then a Jesus figure who, for all kind of intents and purposes, would essentially be Jesus. He fits the archetype of Jesus. It's like the superheroes in Marvel and stuff where they give them a slight costume change and a name change, but it's the exact same superhero with the exact same powers. Yes, Jesus was over here. Whether it was actually Jesus Christ under that name, he was over here. I'm not familiar with this idea of a portal, but, if you'd like to call in and talk about it, I can launch another Zoom. Yeah, the Mormons are rather interesting. I've been wanting to learn about them for a really long time, and this is the first time I really kind of delved into their religion and actually started to figure them out a little bit, and they're quite interesting. And on that, Chad, about the world ending soon, if you are not familiar with the spicy sun, basically, in a nutshell, our magnetic field is weakening and it's accelerating in its weakening, and the sun is getting more and more active. So while I don't think the world ends Monday because of the sun, it might be in the next, 20 to 40 years, a big solar flare wiping us all out, which I think happens occasionally and has happened to humanity several times throughout our history. Okay. So yeah, if no one wants to call in, I think I'm gonna wrap it up. That was I don't feel like I did the best job presenting this. I did a lot of research into this, and the research really was pretty solid, pretty conclusive, that the parallels between Jesus Christ and Quetzalcoatl were pretty overwhelming. The only question was, were these parallels written in deliberately by Catholics? Was the erasure and rewriting of their, of their history and Catholicizing of their history, is that why you see those parallels? Or is that the original story? I don't know, because the parallels were quite enormous. And the fact that you see, like I said, there's statues that are definitely pre-Columbian that show Quetzalcoatl with the stigmata, which is a pretty specific thing. It makes me think that, that might be the true story, and potentially the other stories are actually, the rewrites, the cover-ups. Not that I think there were likely multiple versions of the story even in Mesoamerica before the Spaniards arrived, but then, I think the Spaniards messed with it some more. So I launched another meeting, but I am wrapping up if no one else is calling. But yeah, I wish I did a better job presenting it, but Quetzalcoatl, strong connections to the cross, strong. He basically preached the same messages as Jesus Christ. It was love and peace and wisdom, and like I said, he was anti-human sacrifice. He sacrificed himself for his people. And there's several different stories of his sacrifice, but one of them is him being crucified. No, I don't. I still don't think I have the email, Mr. Slav. I don't. You said you were going to post it in the chat a couple weeks ago, and I didn't. I haven't. Maybe you're posting it. You know what I bet it is? I bet you're posting it in chat, and it's getting removed and auto-edited out by YouTube's filters, because I have not seen it in chat. So if you email it to me, I'll get it. But I don't think it's letting me see it in chat. So if you send it to that email, I'll be able to, reach out to them. Mr. G, I don't know if you want to come on still potentially. Let me know if, when. We'll set that up. Otherwise, I might have Wandering Wolf. I have to reach back out to him here. But before he went on his trip, it sounded positive that he might be on the show. So I might have him on here soon. If you have other people you want me to reach out to, let me know. And I'll do that, because guests are fun. It's all fun. So, all right, fellas. Chad, since you're here, I'll update you on Chadwick the chicken. It's been a while since I've updated people on Chad, but he is fully healed. The dude is a little Wolverine X-Men. Zero signs of injury anymore. I was amazed. I didn't think those wounds would ever heal. They were massive. I didn't think it was possible for it to heal. But he's all healed up, and he has solidly taken his place as the alpha chicken amongst the group. He wasn't the alpha before being injured, but now he's very clearly the alpha. So Chad's doing well. But all right, fellas, I will catch you next week, potentially with stories of Brewer's Cave and other connections between Native North Americans and copper plates and Christianity, and this, whole theme that we've been talking about with Burroughs Cave and the Michigan relics, and to some degree Quetzalcoatl. So that's probably what's going to be next week, but who knows? I'll figure out exactly what we're going to do, but that will be coming soon, if not next week. So thanks for tuning in, and leave a like if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys next week. Once I get this closed.